Good morning. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out here today on such a beautiful day. I am Ken Nelson, and what a great honor to be here. And I want to thank Aaron for all the hard work he did to get us to this point. What a beautiful library. If you haven't been inside, please go take a look. This is a Carnegie library, and the history that has happened at this location, I just can't imagine. So I'm going to be short and to the point. Jason Neely is our library director amongst a bunch of other things, and I think he does a tremendous job. And welcome, Jason, and you're up. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Neely, library director. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and we're known for a few things there. Sometimes a funny accent, which I think that I've pretty much knocked out of my my vocabulary. Heinz ketchup, the Steelers. But one thing that's always been a big part of my life is the legacy of Andrew Carnegie. Growing up in Pittsburgh, I'd often go to the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, see the big dinosaur skeletons there. My first job out of college was at the Carnegie Science Center. I went to college at the University of Pittsburgh, and right across the street from the university was the first Carnegie Library. I didn't know it at the time. It was the first of 2,500 libraries that Andrew Carnegie built. Over the summer, my wife and I were up in Vermont, and she needed to attend a Zoom meeting. We were camping, the cell service was non-existent, and so we went down to Fairhaven to their library, and we show up so she can get on the Wi-Fi, and lo and behold, the building looked identical to this, and it was another Carnegie Library. They had some great librarians there who were happy to talk about the history of the building. And speaking of incredible staff, going back to 1985, 40 years, we've had 4 branch librarians here. Barbara Nozel was there during the 80s and 90s. Colleen Santinella, Kristen Massetti, and Amy Sixt are our most recent ones, and they're with us here today. So the Pearl Street Library is really the heart of Thompsonville. Andrew Carnegie believed that libraries are vital because they help people who want to help themselves get further in their lives. Last year, we had 14,000 people walk through these doors right here. That's just at the branch library, not the 2 buildings. More than 12,000 items were checked out of here. Amy and her staff helped more than 3,000 people with reference questions. When you multiply that out over the past 111 years, which is how long this building has been here, that's a heck of a lot of people that we've helped here. A couple other acknowledgements that I want to make. The buildings and ground staff do an outstanding job of keeping this historic building in good operating condition. Custodial, day in, day out, they're here all the time. The community police officers, I saw Sergeant Austin here earlier, does an outstanding job of coming in, checking in, and they've really made themselves part of the fabric of the Thompsonville community. The Friends of the Library are here with some refreshments. They provide outstanding support to the library day in, day out. And finally, I want to acknowledge Aaron Markovich and Christy Koistinen from the Department of Economic and Community Development for the hard work that they do to get the Pearl Street Library listed on the National Historic Register. So, Aaron?
Thank you, Jason. Good morning. Probably the most common question I was getting is, why are we here today? The plaque that's being unveiled today marks the library's addition to the National Register of Historic Places. And I want to, as somebody who's been in the historic preservation field for a very long time, that tends to be the most common thing that people screw up. The National Registry, it's the register place, nobody can see it. The National Register of Historic Places. That is the official list of America's most important buildings and sites, places that tell our shared stories. Placing the building on the register is a chance to recognize the legacy, but also find ways to fund more ongoing maintenance. Putting it on there opens us up for grant funding that we can obtain. As you'll hear in a moment, maintenance may actually be the longest part of this building's history. A shout out to Stacy Viro, our consultant who did this work through a 2023 certified local government grant. through the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office. Thank you to Mary Dunn, Jenny Schofield, and Jonathan Kinney from the State Historic Preservation Office for being here today. Funding for this program actually comes from the National Park Service down through the State Historic Preservation Office. So continuing to fund and support the State Historic Preservation Office is not only important to the state as a whole, but to our community in particular because of the impact that they have on our work for ongoing community preservation. I'll also note the director before me that initiated this grant, Nelson Terezo, as well as our community development specialist, Christy, who's been invaluable in making sure the office functions and manages the grant. And she also managed the department during a transition period. So that's when this grant was happening. So thank you to Christy. So a little bit of background. This building, the Enfield Library, is a classical revival style Carnegie Library designed in 1911 by the Boston architectural firm of McLean and Wright. It was the first purpose-built free library constructed in the rapidly growing town of Enfield and one of only 11 libraries funded by the Carnegie Corporation in the state. So Jason took a little bit of my thunder away because I was going to say, as somebody who was born and raised in Pittsburgh, I say, I talk a little bit differently, and most people might call this a Carnegie Library or Carnegie Library. In Pittsburgh, we always say it a little bit different. So additionally, my wife is from Lancaster, New Hampshire, where there is a identical style building that is their central library, and that's where I really have connected with a Carnegie Library. So it's been a real pleasure to have the experience of working with this. And I just want to give you a little bit of information from the National Register. There's some sheets up here that folks can grab that give you a little bit deeper history. But there is a process in historic preservation that tells you how these buildings are important. And so there is something that's called a Criterion A, and that is the area of social history at the local level of an example of a philanthropic program administered by Andrew Carnegie and specifically his personal secretary, James Bertram, that funded 1,679 libraries and communities across the United States, 11 of which are in Connecticut. The guy that designed this, William McLean, designed 2 other Carnegie libraries in Connecticut, West Haven and South Norwalk. Prior to taking on the design here, Enfield remains the most intact. There have been no major additions or renovations to the original plan since 1914. That's important in historic preservation. We love to see buildings that continue to maintain all of that original design. Carnegie is well known for being the guy who said, "The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced." He funded his first library in Scotland, but he later published articles about wealth and the best fields of philanthropy. He listed 7 areas that he wanted to fund. Enlarge a university, fund free libraries, establish hospitals, present public parks, open public halls with organs, and erect swimming baths and build churches. And he wrote at one point, "The result of my own study of the question, what is the best gift that can be given to a community, is that a free library occupies first place, provided that the community will accept and maintain it as a public institution, as much of the city property as public schools. I resolved, if ever wealth came to me, that it should be used to establish free libraries, that other," as he wrote, "poor boys might receive opportunities similar to those for which we're indebted to that noble man." So in particular with Enfield, the Enfield Library Association was established in 1874, and its first collection was housed in a private house on Enfield Street. The first publicly library was opened on the 2nd floor of Town Hall in Thompsonville on April 11th, 1896. There was a gentleman that came along, and his name was John Lamont Pickens. And he wasn't a factory owner, he wasn't a politician, he was a bookkeeper for a feed store in town. He lived with his mother and sister, never married, led a modest, quiet life, but he had a stubborn New England streak. And he decided that Enfield deserved a real public library. He became a board member, and it was his job to make sure that the grants got filed to make this a reality. At the time, the town didn't have much money to spare. We've heard these stories before. The mills were growing, the population was booming, funds went to school and basic service, but Pickens didn't let that stop him. He wrote to the secretary, James Bertram, asking for a grant. Bertram was famous for being a little abrupt. And his first reply was basically, you don't have enough money pledged locally, we're not going to do it. Told him no. This is where Pickens really started to dig in. He wrote, Pickens wrote that Enfield's 10,000 inhabitants need a library building here very much, and I write these few lines to let you know of our condition. The Board of Selectmen supported the application, stating the town could offer $1,000 in maintenance, since money had already been appropriated to the construction of new schools. There's like familiar themes I'm hearing, right? Bertram replied 3 days later, reiterating that the conditions of the grant required a pledge of revenue from taxation and the advice that you better discuss the matter with your state librarian. The Board of Selectmen eventually agreed to the terms. They agreed to how much the funding would work. They went back and forth. They passed resolutions at town council to provide a building site. Carnegie would give a total of $12,500 to the town. And Pickens then, instead of just saying, yes, thank you for that money, went back and said, no, actually, we need more. And they went back and forth. Finally, Bertram, clearly irritated, replied that he had spent a considerable amount of time going back and forth on the matter and that you had better get together and finally say what you're prepared to give. He was kind of ticked off at him. Most people would have stopped there, right? You're getting yelled at by your grant maker. Nope, he didn't. He kept on writing for years and years. He pressed, and he even threatened to travel down to New York in person to see what he could figure out. So eventually the selectmen passed the resolutions and the funding. They rectified their differences, managed to pass a resolution, and a newspaper article in the Hartford Courant at the time said, the committee was established, thus Enfield has redeemed itself from this ridiculous situation in which the town was placed by the unusual action at the last town meeting. So it was quite the process to get to this point. Eventually the persistence wore them down, and in the end the foundation agreed to give $20,000 to provide the library, provided that the town pledged to maintain it. And they continued to work and get it. Pickens never sought recognition. He went back to his job at the feed store, living quietly with his sister, but he's remembered now as the father of Enfield's library. So adding this to the register doesn't just recognize the beauty of the building, although we can recognize that. It recognizes generations of Enfield residents who kept it alive and made it matter. It means that this library isn't only part of Enfield's history, it's part of our nation's history too. It ensures the legacy of John Pickens and the community he fought for will be remembered and protected for years to come. So on that, I would like for us to unveil. I would like to have our town council on this side, and I think our staff from the library are going to be on this side. Grab yourself a piece of string, and we will unveil. Make sure that you walk through the garden. There you go. All right. Everybody grab a piece of string there.
Two in the front, two in the back.
And we can give you a little countdown.
Lori, you can stand next to Marie. John, you stay down one step so you don't.
Everybody has
Never
to
mind.
stand
There
until
you
pictures
go.
are taken.
No, I just don't want to be so much taller. There you go.
You guys have matching glasses, guys.
Okay.
We blend. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Hold. All right, thank you everybody for coming out. Again, we have snacks and drinks. You are also more than welcome to take a walk inside and see the building. It is a really great example of the architecture. Thank you.